Are you the type of person who sees through people's masks before they even realize they're wearing one? Do you find yourself analyzing every conversation, every gesture, every hidden motive while others just take things at face value? If you're nodding your head right now, then you might be one of those rare individuals who shares something profound with history's most controversial political strategist. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today with something that's going to challenge everything you think you know about being an introvert, about being misunderstood, and about the power that comes from seeing the world differently than everyone else. This isn't your typical personality type video. This isn't for the crowd followers or the people pleasers. This is specifically for those of you who've always felt like outsiders looking in, who've been called too intense, too deep, or too analytical. This is for the loners, the deep thinkers, and especially for my fellow INFJs who've wondered why they seem to understand human nature in ways that others just don't. Today we're diving deep into why INFJs and Machiavelli's teachings have more in common than you'd ever imagine. And trust me, by the end of this video you'll understand why your so-called flaws might actually be your greatest strengths. 1. Why this message isn't for everyone. Let's get one thing straight right off the bat. This video isn't going to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. It's not about finding your tribe or celebrating how special you are. This is about understanding the raw, unfiltered truth about human nature and how some of us are naturally wired to see it clearly. Most people live in a world of comfortable illusions. They believe that everyone has good intentions, that fairness always wins, and that being nice will get you where you need to go. That's not necessarily wrong, but it's incomplete. And if you're an INFJ, you already know this because you've probably been burned by trusting too easily or giving people the benefit of the doubt when your gut was screaming warnings. The thing is, INFJs make up only about 1 to 2% of the population. We're talking about a tiny fraction of people who process the world through this unique lens of intuitive understanding combined with deep emotional intelligence. You don't think like most people, you don't see situations like most people, and you definitely don't navigate relationships like most people. This rarity means you've probably felt misunderstood your entire life. People have called you too sensitive when you were actually picking up on subtle social dynamics they couldn't even see. They've labeled you antisocial when you were simply choosing solitude over shallow connections. They've said you're overthinking when you were actually seeing patterns and connections that others missed completely. Here's the reality check though. This different way of processing the world isn't just about being sensitive or intuitive. It's about having a natural understanding of human psychology that can be incredibly powerful when you learn how to use it strategically. 2. The INFJ mind, natural-born strategist. Before we dive into Machiavelli's world, let's talk about what's actually going on in that complex mind of yours. As an INFJ, you're running on what psychologists call dominant introverted intuition. What this means in practical terms is that you're constantly processing information below the surface, making connections that others don't see, and developing insights about people and situations that seem to come out of nowhere. You've probably had those moments where you just knew something about someone without being able to explain why. Maybe you met someone new and immediately sensed they weren't trustworthy, even though they seemed perfectly nice to everyone else. Later, your instincts were proven right, but by then, others had already been disappointed or hurt. This isn't magic or supernatural intuition. It's your brain processing micro-expressions, vocal tones, body language, and subtle behavioral patterns at lightning speed. You're essentially running a continuous background analysis of everyone around you, whether you realize it or not. But here's where it gets interesting for our discussion about Machiavelli. This natural ability to read people and situations creates what I call the INFJ paradox. On one hand, you deeply care about people and want to help them. You have this genuine desire to make the world better and to connect with others on a meaningful level. On the other hand, you can see through people's facades and understand their true motivations with sometimes uncomfortable clarity. This creates an internal tension that most INFJs struggle with their entire lives. You want to trust people and believe the best in them, but your natural lie detection system is constantly showing you evidence to the contrary. You want to be open and vulnerable, but your pattern recognition keeps warning you about potential threats and manipulations. 3. Machiavelli, the misunderstood master of human nature. Now, let's talk about Niccolò Machiavelli because chances are, everything you think you know about him is probably wrong. When most people hear his name, they immediately think of manipulation, ruthlessness, and the idea that the ends justify the means. They picture some cold, calculating villain who taught people how to be cruel and dishonest. But here's the thing, Machiavelli wasn't teaching people to be evil. He was simply describing reality as he observed it. He spent years studying successful and failed leaders, analyzing political movements, and watching how power actually works in the real world. What he discovered wasn't pretty, but it was true. Machiavelli's core insight was this: there's a massive difference between how we wish the world worked and how it actually works. He argued that if you want to be effective in any area of life, whether that's politics, business, or even personal relationships, you need to understand people as they really are, not as you wish they were. Sound familiar? If you're an INFJ, you've probably come to similar conclusions through your own observations. You've seen how the nicest people don't always win. You've watched manipulative individuals climb the ladder while genuine, hardworking people get passed over. You've witnessed how people will say one thing to your face and do something completely different behind your back. Machiavelli wasn't celebrating these realities, he was simply acknowledging them. And more importantly, he was teaching people how to navigate a world where these dynamics exist. This is where the connection to INFJs becomes really interesting. 4. The strategic advantage of being a loner. Here's something that might surprise you. Your tendency towards solitude isn't a weakness or a character flaw. It's actually a strategic advantage that most people don't have and can't understand. While others are caught up in the drama and noise of constant social interaction, you're developing something much more valuable: perspective. When you step back from the crowd, you can see patterns that people in the middle of the action miss completely. You notice how certain individuals manipulate conversations, how group dynamics shift, and how people's behavior changes depending on who's watching. This observer status gives you insights that are incredibly valuable, but only if you learn how to use them effectively. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. He wrote about the importance of being able to step outside of situations and analyze them objectively. He talked about how leaders need to sometimes isolate themselves to make clear decisions without being influenced by the emotions and opinions of others. As an INFJ loner, you're already doing this naturally. Every time you choose to spend a weekend alone instead of going to a party, you're maintaining the mental clarity that allows you to see situations clearly. Every time you prefer deep conversation with one person over small talk with a group, you're gathering the kind of intimate psychological insights that others never access. But here's the key: this strategic advantage only works if you recognize it as such and learn to apply it consciously. Too many INFJs see their loner tendencies as something to apologize for or overcome, when they should actually be developing them as a core strength. 5. Reading people, the INFJ superpower Machiavelli would envy. Let's get specific about one of your most powerful abilities as an INFJ: your natural talent for reading people. This isn't just about being empathetic or sensitive. This is about having an almost uncanny ability to understand people's motivations, fears, desires, and hidden agendas. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of understanding human nature. He argued that successful people need to be able to predict how others will behave in different situations. They need to understand what drives people, what they're afraid of, and what they really want beneath what they claim to want. This kind of psychological insight was something Machiavelli had to develop through careful observation and study. For you, as an INFJ, it's practically hardwired into your operating system. You don't just see what people are doing, you see why they're doing it. You don't just hear what they're saying, you hear what they're not saying. Think about the last time you were in a group conversation where someone was telling a story that didn't quite add up. While others were politely nodding along, you were probably noticing inconsistencies, picking up on emotional undertones, and developing a much more complete picture of what was really happening. This isn't nosiness or judgment, it's psychological intelligence. The challenge for most INFJs is that they feel guilty about these insights. They think it's somehow wrong to see through people's presentations of themselves. They worry that having these perceptions makes them judgmental or cynical. But Machiavelli would tell you that this guilt is misplaced and potentially dangerous. Understanding people clearly isn't about judging them harshly, it's about protecting yourself and making informed decisions about how to interact with them. When you can see that someone is insecure, you can choose to either exploit that insecurity or support them through it. When you recognize that someone is manipulative, you can choose to either fall for their tactics or maintain appropriate boundaries. 6. The art of strategic thinking in relationships. One of the most controversial aspects of Machiavellian thinking is the idea that relationships require strategy. Most people, especially those with strong feeling preferences, resist this concept because it sounds cold and calculating. But if you're an INFJ, you've probably already discovered that good intentions alone aren't enough to create successful relationships. You've likely experienced situations where you gave too much of yourself to people who weren't capable of reciprocating. You've probably trusted people who took advantage of your kindness, or opened up to individuals who used your vulnerability against you. These experiences have taught you, sometimes painfully, that relationships require more than just love and good intentions. They require wisdom and strategy. Machiavelli's approach to relationships wasn't about manipulation or exploitation. It was about understanding the dynamics at play and making conscious choices about how to navigate them. He understood that people have different motivations, different communication styles, and different capacity for genuine connection. For INFJs, this strategic approach to relationships isn't about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about using your natural insights to create better boundaries, make wiser choices about who to trust, and protect your emotional energy from people who would drain or misuse it. This might mean recognizing when someone is testing your boundaries and responding firmly instead of accommodating their behavior. It might mean understanding that certain people can only handle surface-level relationships and not trying to force deeper connections with them. It might mean seeing through someone's charm offensive and making decisions based on their actions rather than their words. 7. Why society fears the INFJ-Machiavellian combination. Here's something most people won't talk about openly. Society has a vested interest in keeping certain individuals from understanding their own power. The combination of INFJ psychological intelligence and Machiavellian strategic thinking creates a type of person who can see through social facades, understand hidden power structures, and navigate complex situations with remarkable effectiveness. This combination is threatening to people who benefit from others' naivety. It's uncomfortable for individuals who prefer to operate through manipulation or social pressure. It challenges systems that depend on people accepting surface-level explanations and not digging deeper into underlying motivations. Think about how often INFJs are labeled as too intense or too deep when they ask probing questions or refuse to accept simple explanations. Think about how society pushes the message that being strategic or calculating in relationships is somehow morally wrong. These messages aren't random, they serve a purpose. When INFJs learn to combine their natural psychological intelligence with strategic thinking, they become very difficult to manipulate or control. They can see through sales tactics, political spin, and social manipulation with clarity that makes others uncomfortable. They can make decisions based on reality rather than wishful thinking or social pressure. This doesn't mean becoming cynical or paranoid. It means developing the ability to see situations clearly and make choices based on complete information rather than partial truths or social expectations. 8. The introvert's hidden influence network. One of the biggest misconceptions about introverts, especially INFJs, is that they don't have influence or power because they're not constantly networking or self-promoting. But Machiavelli understood something that most people miss. The most effective influence often happens behind the scenes, through deep relationships and strategic positioning. As an INFJ, you probably don't have hundreds of casual acquaintances, but you likely have a few very deep, meaningful relationships with people who trust your judgment and value your insights. These individuals often come to you for advice, perspective, and emotional support. What you might not realize is that this creates a form of influence that's much more powerful than traditional networking. When someone trusts you enough to share their real problems, fears, and aspirations, they're giving you access to information that others don't have. When they consistently turn to you for guidance, they're acknowledging your wisdom and judgment. When they implement your suggestions and see positive results, they're validating your strategic thinking abilities. Machiavelli wrote about the power of being a trusted advisor rather than always seeking to be the person in the spotlight. He understood that the people who whisper in the ear of the decision-maker often have more real influence than the decision-maker themselves. Your natural tendency to form deep, meaningful relationships positions you perfectly for this type of behind-the-scenes influence. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room if you're the voice that the loudest person listens to in private. 9. Emotional intelligence as a strategic weapon. Let's talk about something that most discussions of Machiavellian strategy completely miss: the incredible strategic value of emotional intelligence. Traditional interpretations of Machiavelli focus on cold, logical calculation, but they ignore his deep understanding of human emotions and how they drive behavior. As an INFJ, your emotional intelligence isn't just about being compassionate or understanding. It's about having access to information that others miss. When you can accurately read someone's emotional state, you can predict their behavior, understand their decision-making process, and influence situations in ways that seem almost magical to outside observers. You've probably had experiences where you could sense someone was about to quit their job, end a relationship, or make a major life change before they consciously realized it themselves. This isn't psychic ability, it's your emotional radar picking up on subtle signals that indicate internal shifts. Machiavelli would have recognized this as an incredibly valuable strategic asset. When you can predict how people will react emotionally to different situations, you can position yourself advantageously, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and create outcomes that benefit everyone involved. The key is learning to use this emotional intelligence strategically rather than just reactively. Instead of simply absorbing everyone else's emotions, you can use your understanding to guide conversations, diffuse tensions, and create environments where positive outcomes are more likely. 10. The power of selective vulnerability. One of the most sophisticated concepts in both INFJ psychology and Machiavellian strategy is the strategic use of vulnerability. Most people think of vulnerability as either all or nothing. You're either completely open or completely closed off. But there's a much more nuanced approach that can be incredibly effective. As an INFJ, you've probably learned through painful experience that being vulnerable with the wrong people can lead to betrayal, manipulation, or emotional harm. But completely closing yourself off isn't the answer either, because it prevents you from forming the deep connections you need to thrive. The strategic approach is to become consciously selective about when, how, and with whom you share your vulnerability. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. It's about being wise and protective of your emotional resources. Machiavelli understood that showing vulnerability at the right time and place could actually increase your influence and create stronger alliances. When you share something personal with someone who has earned your trust, it deepens the relationship and often inspires them to be more open with you in return. But this requires careful judgment about timing, context, and the other person's character. You need to assess whether someone has the emotional capacity to handle your vulnerability, whether they've demonstrated trustworthiness in smaller matters, and whether the potential benefits of opening up outweigh the risks. 11. Navigating toxic environments with strategic detachment. Here's a reality that most INFJs have to face. Sometimes you find yourself in environments that are toxic, manipulative, or simply incompatible with your values. This might be a workplace with a destructive culture, a social group with hidden dynamics, or even family situations that drain your energy and compromise your well-being. Traditional advice for sensitive people usually focuses on either enduring the situation with patience or removing yourself completely. But Machiavellian thinking offers a third option: strategic detachment combined with tactical engagement. Strategic detachment means maintaining emotional distance from the toxic dynamics while still physically participating when necessary. You observe the games people are playing without getting emotionally invested in the outcomes. You protect your energy and values while still accomplishing what you need to accomplish in that environment. This approach requires developing what I call emotional armor, the ability to witness dysfunction and manipulation without letting it penetrate your psychological well-being. You become like a researcher studying an interesting but potentially dangerous phenomenon. At the same time, tactical engagement means making strategic choices about when to speak up, when to remain silent, and how to position yourself for maximum effectiveness with minimum personal cost. You might choose to build alliances with other people who share your values, document problematic behavior, or gradually position yourself for a better opportunity. 12. The long-term vision that others miss. One of the most valuable aspects of the INFJ personality type is the natural tendency toward long-term thinking. While most people are focused on immediate gratification or short-term gains, you're usually considering how current actions will play out over months, years, or even decades. This long-term perspective is something Machiavelli valued highly in effective leaders. He understood that the most important consequences of our actions often don't become apparent until much later, and that people who can think strategically about the future have enormous advantages over those who can't. Your natural ability to see patterns and project them forward gives you insights that others miss completely. You might recognize that a particular career path will lead to burnout, that a relationship has fundamental incompatibilities, or that a business decision will have negative consequences down the road. The challenge is that this long-term thinking can make you seem pessimistic or overly cautious to others. People might interpret your strategic hesitation as fear or your careful analysis as overthinking. But Machiavelli would tell you that this patient, thoughtful approach to decision-making is one of your greatest strengths. The key is learning to trust your long-term vision while still taking appropriate action in the present. You don't want to become paralyzed by overanalysis, but you also don't want to ignore the valuable insights that come from thinking beyond immediate circumstances. Conclusion: embracing your strategic nature. If you've made it this far, you're probably experiencing some mix of recognition, validation, and maybe a little bit of discomfort. That discomfort is normal. It's what happens when you start to see yourself and your capabilities more clearly than you have before. The truth is, combining INFJ psychological intelligence with Machiavellian strategic thinking doesn't make you cold, manipulative, or morally questionable. It makes you realistic, effective, and much better equipped to navigate a complex world while maintaining your integrity and values. You don't have to apologize for seeing through people's facades. You don't have to feel guilty for thinking strategically about relationships. You don't have to suppress your natural ability to understand hidden motivations and power dynamics. These aren't flaws to overcome, they're strengths to develop and use wisely. The world needs people who can see clearly, think strategically, and act with both wisdom and compassion. It needs individuals who understand human nature deeply enough to create better systems, healthier relationships, and more effective solutions to complex problems. Your tendency towards solitude gives you perspective. Your psychological intelligence gives you insight. Your strategic thinking gives you effectiveness. Combined together, these create a powerful toolkit for navigating life successfully while staying true to your values and making a positive impact on the people around you. So stop apologizing for being intense, deep, or different. Stop trying to be more social, more trusting, or more conventional. Instead, start developing your natural abilities consciously and strategically. Learn to use your insights wisely, build relationships carefully, and apply your understanding of human nature in ways that benefit both yourself and others. The world might not always understand you, but it needs what you have to offer. And once you fully understand and accept your own strategic nature, you'll find that you're much more powerful and effective than you ever realized. Remember, this isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming more skillfully and strategically who you already are. And that, my fellow loners and deep thinkers, is how you turn your greatest challenges into your most powerful strengths.